Good morning, everyone. So I'm here today to present you a few things that we do at DV Mobile. We are a company dedicated for VR. We are working with VR since 5 years now, and we are a team of around 40 people. Just to know you a bit better before I start, who has already participated in a 360 video project? A 360 video project, whatever, stitching, shooting, distributing. Okay, good. And who has been involved in the stitching part? Okay, so quite a public of experts. So I try to adjust what I will say. So the session will be split in 20 minutes talk and then 10 minutes Q&A. I will try to do that. Actually, a bit more than 1 year ago, Jean-Pierre Navarro from Intel came to see us, and they had a kind of an issue. They had their next generation processor, CPU, that was able to decode HEVC 10 bits, so the container for HDR video. And they didn't know how to showcase the technology. So they came to see us, and we thought that it would be a very good way to use HEVC 10 bits within a VR 360 video workflow. So that's what I'm gonna show you today. So first, I would like to define quickly what virtual reality is, because it involves actually a lot of things. So I will read this definition. Virtual reality is an artificial environment that is created with software and presented to the user in such a way that the user suspends belief and accepts it as a real environment. So really, in other words, our work producing VR is really about creating an illusion in the user brain. If you give enough cues to the user, actually the brain will help you a lot to make the people believe that what they are saying is true. So there is also, I will tell you after, the different cues that actually are important. There is also many different types of virtual reality, so I will present 4 of them. There is many other types, but that's the kind of virtual reality that we are interested in. So the first kind that you surely all experienced already, it's 360 video. Monoscopic, stereoscopic, that you watch with an HMD or with a screen. So here you can see the Gear VR. So it's an experience that you all made. It's an experience that you can produce with the classical tools, camera, and actually a rig of camera or just one camera. And then there is a lot of techniques, but it's still quite, let's say, natural with the workflow that we were using before. Then you have a different kind of VR. There is the parallax shifting kind. So it's the same. You can orient your head in all the directions, plus you can move your head. And when you move your head, you have an image that fits how you move your head. So this is already a different kind of VR, and it means a different kind of production tool. You don't use anymore a camera. You are not using a video player anymore, more a game engine. So it is a second kind of VR, and it's very important for all of us to master the definition, I think. The third kind of VR is the room scale. So you can walk freely in a room environment. The surface is between 10 meters square and 25 meters square. And once again, the way you produce the content and the way you distribute the content and the platform which are used to produce and distribute are completely different than with 360 video. And the last kind is the large field. So it's the same as the room scale. You can move freely in a room, but the room is much, much larger. It's between 200 meters square and 500 meters square, and it allows for the people to move in an open environment. So this is arcade, not very interesting, but it shows you the kind of setup. So depending on the kind of VR you are producing, there is different principles that allow you, if you master them, to trick the brain well and create the illusion in the user head. So the first principle is the principle of proprioception. It means that the user is able to know where he is in the space and where his body parts are in the space. It's very important to master this first principle because it's from this that nausea, motion sickness is caused. I mean, if in the headset there is a movement like this, and the user is not experiences the internal ear and so on, is not experiences these movements, then it causes motion sickness. So to principle of proprioception, there is only one that is important for 360 video. The other one are more for the other kind of VR. But it is very, very important principle if we want to do virtual reality well. The second principle that for me is really important, it's the 18 depth cues. The brain actually recreates the space around us with binocular vision, but there is a lot of cues, actually parallax, the fact that when I move my head, even if I have only one eye, then I will have a sense of depth. And this is all very, very important. And finally, sound spatialization is one of the tools that helps create this illusion of presence that is what we are seeking for in VR. So I will focus on one of two cues. So when considering our problematic, which is HDR, so how HDR can improve the illusion. So actually one of the cues is that, for example, now when I look at you, there is a big light in front of my eyes, and my iris is closing for the eye to adapt to the lighting condition. And that's why I don't see you at all, and I just can see this big spot in front of my eye. If I turn around, then it's a bit shadow, so my iris is gonna get a bit more open, and the overall exposure of what I see is gonna go up a bit. So that's what we are going to try to mimic with HDR video in virtual reality. So to be able to do that, there is first things that there is different kind of HDR images and videos. There is the false HDR that we call HDR look, and that you surely all know because it's what we do when we are doing VR photography. So we take multiple shots, and then we do an overall exposition balancing, and we produce an image which is a JPG that we then distribute. It makes very beautiful images because the light parts are not burned and the shadowy parts are not too black. But this is false HDR. Actually, true HDR means that we're gonna record in the file format all the dynamic that we will not be able to push on a monitor because the monitor is only 3 times 8 bits, and we are going to store more like 3 times 10 bits or 3 times 12 bits. So there is a format that we like a lot, which is OpenAXR, and which work in 32-bit floats, which allows to store all this information and all this dynamic that we want to play with then. So about this cue, the eye adaptation to light, actually we can do a bit the same. We can mimic it by storing all this dynamic And then in real time, depending on the user, where the user is gonna watch, we're gonna adapt the exposure. So I took this image from internet and adapted a little. Actually, on the top, you can see what happened in a normal workflow. So you have, maybe no. So you have the human dynamic range in the left, top left. So you have all the spectrum, the visible spectrum. And then when you capture, you are already like shrinking down this huge dynamic that the eye can perceive. And at the different step of production, like post-production and mastering and distribution, you're gonna lower this this dynamic actually. And when it comes to the display, it's crushed down to 3 times 8 bits. So if I take an example, we're gonna capture in RAW. So we're gonna have a nice RAW 12 bits, and in post-production, we're gonna go down to a 16-bit float, and then 8 bits. So we are lowering and lowering and lowering the dynamic. At the end, actually, the kind of intensity of light that we can mimic is between 0 and 100 candela per meter square, or nit, I call it nit. So with the pipeline that we produce, actually, we are going to try to capture all the visible light dynamic, and we're going to try to store it until we display it. And when we display it, we're going to adapt, actually, and just take a part of this dynamic, only the part that interests us. So, for example, I look at the sun directly, and I'm going to take the higher part of the visible spectrum, or the higher part of the intensity, actually. And all the black is going to be super black. And when I'm going to look at an average part of the image, for example, let's say around here, not the sun, then I'm gonna once again adjust the part of the spectrum, the visible spectrum that we're gonna see. So that's what we want to do. So it's about creating the illusion, and this HDR pipeline allows us to get one more Q, which is eye adaptation. That's the idea. So we did a first to test the workflow. We did a first video that you may be able to see if we succeed on making it work at the marketplace. So we went to shoot the Icarus Cup. It's a strange cup you'll see after. It's a festival of people that like to free ride with parachute and this kind of stuff. You will see the image after. So during the preparation, we worked a lot on discovering what HEVC 10 and 12 bits was able to store as a dynamic range. And we saw that we could actually get really very large dynamic, like between 0 and 100,000 candela per meter square or nits, which is 100,000, it's when you look directly at the sun, that's the value of intensity. So you can really store all the spectrum. We try to find the best way to capture this HDR image. So we tried several camera systems. Red has a nice system that is called HDR-X, which is basically multiple exposure shots, the same as what we do in photography. So there is a first image which is taken with an exposure, and then a second one with plus like 3 or 6 EV. And then by merging the two images, you get a fairly good HDR image. The only issue is that as you are taking two images, they are not taken exactly at the same time, and it involves some ghosting effects. So we didn't go for this one because Icarus-Cup was about moving camera, and so it wouldn't work. We checked also the Canon because with a very well-known, very famous firmware hack, you can actually get to shoot HDR images, but as the Canon can't be gen-locked, and it's very important when you have moving images, it's important all the time actually, we didn't select this solution. And we tried Alexa Mini HDR solution, which is not purely stricto sensu HDR camera, but allows a bit more than 16 stops of dynamic, which is enough to do what we wanted. We also looked at the tools for editing and grading. It was very early stage for HDR, so there was not much tools actually that were existing at the time. But we tried after new Resolve and so on, and went to build our own tools to begin with. The shooting, we used 3 Alexa Mini in a rig with a tangential approach. You will ask me a question about it if you're interested after. Genlock was made with precise timecode clusters. We used the Arero 4/3 option, which was very important for us. 8mm lens and custom machinery. The post-production, all the dailies and so on, the conversion had been made on the Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. Then we use Nuke plus Caravere, so DaVinci Resolve, we created OpenEXR images that were stitched within Nuke plus Caravere. Nuke plus Caravere is an incredible workflow because there is this pristine, meaning you do as little heat filters as possible, and the Nuke is helping you a lot for that. So you don't convert and re-encode the image through the process, which is quite important, and it's a true 32-bit workflow. And then finally, and they were almost the first to fire, Adobe Creative Suite plus Lumetri tools allowed us to do the final editing and the grading. The player has been developed using Unity, SDK given by Intel, the Intel 7th generation Kaby Lake processor, because it's the processor that is doing all the heavy lifting on decoding this stream of data, and high-end GPU. So I will show you a video that presents the Icarus-Cup shooting. So that's the rig. So you can see 3 Alexa Mini, a custom made rig. You can see the TC generator that allows for Genlock. You can ask questions about it after, also it's quite exotic. We always use a live stitch to check the result. And, we shot a lot when the sun was setting, and you know, like in condition that an action cam wouldn't actually deliver well. So this is the Nuke plus Caravere workflow. And the Lumetri tool, I'm gonna pause here, sorry. That's an important one. Actually here, the spectrum here, it's the only tool that we found that allow to see the complete spectrum. So here the scale is between 0 and 100,000 nits. And it allows you to see exactly the data that you have. So above 100 nits, it's all the white that is like, it's pure, there is pure white. For example, let's say a sheet of paper here will be pure white. But if I take a projector and I put it in front of your face, it will be pure white too, but this one will be like with much more light intensity than the white sheet of paper. And this is what you see above 100. It's all the super white or the light white. Okay, 0 seconds. Up. So here you're gonna be able to see at the left, it's with the HDR processing, and at the right, it's without. So as you can see, the exposure is adapting depending on where you see. And that's what you will be able to try on the market. Okay, and I just wanted to thank a lot Michael Kowalczewski, Jean-Pierre Navarro, and Xavier Lad, because it's the people that made this project come to reality. And thank you.
Okay, I think you guys know the drill. It's question time. So, we'll start with the...
Hi, hello. My question is not so technical in this case, as how was that big project founded, and how do you think is going in the future? I mean, is there a future for HDR filming?
Well, I think that so there is two questions clearly. I will start with the second one. Yes, there is a future for HDR, as there is a future for HDR in the normal production. It's a natural path. Anyway, we are trying to match what the human vision is capable of with the screen technology that we have. So we will always go to this path. HDR pipeline now are actually already, we can deploy it quite easily because HEVC 10 bits and the 7th generation Kaby Lake processor are widely distributed. So let's say that it's already a possibility to deploy such content. I have no doubt that Facebook and YouTube, because they are the main platform right now, will embed this kind of technology quite quickly. So yes, and the first question, how was it funded? Actually, we worked in a very small budget, and in end with Intel, and we like a lot to do this kind of research and development project at DV Mobile because it's really what we appreciate to do. So that's how we did it. And now it's a pipeline that we are always using. It means that right now distributors and broadcasters, when they are buying VR, they are already asking to give master files that are bigger than the one they can distribute. So right now we can distribute 4K. For example, when you are working with Arte, that surely everyone knows, which is very like pushing for VR, then they are requiring at least 6K master file. They are requiring like DCP or some kind of RAW master. They want all the specialized audio, master file, and so on. So know that they will ask one day also for HDR.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Are there any more questions? Everyone, oh, over here.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, is there a possibility for us to see it here in Vienna? Did you bring it?
Yes, actually, so in the market, there should be the possibility to experience it. It's not yet working, but I suppose that within 10 minutes it should be all right normally.
Anyone else? All right. Thanks a lot, Antoine.
Thank you. Thank you very much.